Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Yeah, I was excited to get that call. My coaches really helped out and made that happen, so I'm appreciative of it.
Carson Roccaforte of Louisiana Lafayette brings us into this week's episode. One of 10 players that's from the Sun Belt Conference that's going to be playing in the Cape Cod League. And we're here ready for the Sun Belt Conference baseball tournament beginning Tuesday.
Absolutely.
Your ULM Warhawks facing off against Georgia State there, Jeremy.
All right. I just want to say officially to you, Tibbs, congratulations. Arkansas State needed a sweep of the Warhawks to get in, plus a lot of help from Georgia Southern to beat UTA. Georgia Southern gave us that help. Arkansas State responded to the challenge by getting swept by ULM. So congratulations. You get the privilege of facing a pretty up and down Georgia State Panthers team. There's a good chance, Dusty, with you guys riding high, that you get out of that first round.
I'm stretching and waiting on the call to go to Montgomery.
Really? Okay. Do you have some eligibility left? Can you maybe do a little bit of relief pitching if called upon? Do you have that?
A left-handed knuckleball junk baller? Yeah. I'm there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure that they could probably find a place for you on that roster. I know that ULM Warhawks, I believe winners, did they win double digits in conference? Did they make it to it?
Of course.
All right. So that's pretty good. I'm pleased for you.
Well, I'm
very happy.
You know what else I know you're happy about?
No.
We have a new leg of the trio of the show.
Okay.
He's been on the show before as a guest, and Jeremy, you didn't do your job and locked the door behind you, and so he snuck back in.
Yeah, I got it.
Like that.
I got to work on
Records. Shane Mettlen is joining us now. He covers James Madison, so we keep getting that Eastern Division views, and he'll also have some other people from the Daily News Record joining us as well throughout the upcoming season to give us the perspective of the East as well as James Madison. So we welcome you in there, Shane.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'll try to make it fun. I'll try to make it good. I don't know if I can live up to the previous standards here, but I'll do my best.
What we need you to do, Shane, is tell us what the hell's going on with Old Dominion. Because Tibbs and I know nothing about Old Dominion, no matter how hard we try. Thibodeaux, how often have we tried to get somebody from Old Dominion on this show?
I'm not going to lie and say hourly. I've kind of quit because I feel defeated in trying to find somebody to come in and represent the Monarchs. And so, yeah, it's no longer high on my list.
You know, the Monarchs have come in third in the Conference USA standings. They're a good baseball program. I would have loved to talk about the Monarchs, talk a little bit about the baseball program, but we're not going to get that. Instead, we got Shane here, who's maybe going to tell us a little bit about James Madison baseball.
There's not as much to talk about with James Madison baseball as ODU, but they just wrapped up their season. JMU did. They don't get to play in a conference tournament this year.
Ouch.
And Dusty and I were talking before we started recording.
Yep. Injuries
kind of derailed things for them. They ended up with a winning record, kind of middle of the pack in the CAA. It was somewhat disappointing season for them. They had top pro prospect named Chase DeLauder, who started the season as maybe considered one of the top college prospects out there, maybe going to be one of the top one or two college guys drafted. He gets hurt midway through the year, doesn't get that many at bats. His stock's dropping a little bit. He's probably going to be more like a late first rounder now, depending on where things go here in the next month or so. And it just uneventful might be the way to describe JMU baseball right now, because they're just kind of existing. They're not bad, not good, kind of a little bit in between, and they've got to step things up to move to the Sun Belt, I think.
Well, Tibbs and Shane, that's an interesting segue into a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is what a program has to do moving forward to get into that inner orbit of baseball. Because right now in the Sun Belt is a good baseball conference. It's about to become, Tibbs, a tremendous baseball conference. And there's teams out there that can either do one of two things. They can either kind of continue doing what they're doing and being a punching bag for guys like Coastal and Louisiana and South Alabama and Texas State, or we can take on this role as being this sort of top to bottom great baseball conference. This afternoon, I put out an article from Hellraiser talking about how dismal Arkansas State's baseball season was. It was. We're last in a lot of categories. But the way to rebuild it is not necessarily, and JMU might be able to glom on this. When you're talking to boosters, when you're talking to deep pockets, what you're saying is you're about to enter a conference, guys, that's going to be a top tier, nationally recognized baseball conference. And you've got a choice. You can represent a conference that's constantly put in the body bag, or you can have a conference that can take part of these, I don't know, opportunities to gain national recognition. And I think that's the way you raise money for your programs. If you have a program that's lagging behind a bit in terms of program building, facilities, recruiting, that bit. Dusty, back me up on this.
Jeremy, you just sound bitter because your Red Wolves had a horrible, horrible season. But let me ask you this, in all reality, would it have been considered a successful season if you were sitting where I'm sitting and headed to Montgomery as the 10 seed? Is that a successful season, or is it that you're already in that first round bye in the double elimination portion? Is it that you're hoisting a trophy next Sunday? What is the definition of your success?
Well, the definition of success right now for Red Wolves baseball is simply to have more wins than losses. And you look at that and go, well, that doesn't seem like a big deal. Quite frankly, it's been since 2014, since Arkansas State has had a winning conference record. And that's kind of crazy. That is a long ass time not to be plus 500 for conference wins. That's kind of crazy. And if you look back at the history of Arkansas State in the last 17 years, I think maybe there's been 5 years where the Red Wolves have posted a positive conference record. And to me, in the South, especially where baseball can be played year round, there's not really much excuse for that. You should be able to build a program. So yes,
but only five teams had that criteria there, Jeremy. Only five teams were more wins than losses in Sun Belt Conference action.
Well, yeah, but now we're about to receive an influx of teams that's only going to add to that. Tibbs, I mean, what was, for the Warhawks, for instance, what was the measure of success? The Warhawks haven't been very good in the past few years either. I mean, are you satisfied just eking into the tournament? Is that a measure of success for you, or are you just looking at that like, oh, well, we were just not quite as sucky as some of the others?
I think it's that, in the words of Joe Madden, try not to suck today. They didn't suck today.
Absolutely. Shane, I know that baseball is probably like, I don't know where baseball falls in the JMU universe, to tell you the truth. But apparently you have some great guys on the team. What does success look to you for JMU entering the 2023 season?
Well, I think it's going to be kind of a year feeling it out for JMU, just as far as playing in a tougher conference and maybe not knowing what to expect. I think they went into this season in the CAA thinking they should finish, in the top 1 or 2 in the league. I think they were thinking 30 to 35 wins. They wound up with 27. They had a ton of injuries in the last couple months of the season. So it was kind of disappointing in that regard. And I mean, I think the big thing we're going to see here in the next week or so, it'll be interesting to see if they make a coaching change at JMU for baseball. I think the fans base as a whole would probably say it's time to make a coaching change. Marlon Eikenberry been there for a few years. They've been down. They haven't really made a dent in the CAA standings since he's been there. He would probably say, I've gathered some talent. I've had a lot of injuries. We were better this year than we were the last 2 years. It's time to, make a commitment to this program moving into the Sun Belt. But so that's going to be the interesting thing to see for JMU baseball here in the next week or so. Maybe as early as tomorrow because their season's over. If they do make any kind of coaching change, he's been on they've just been rolling his contract over year by year here the last couple of years. And we're able to kind of use COVID as an excuse for that. But they're kind of getting to the point where they either have to commit long-term to a coaching staff or make a change. And so that's where it stands with JMU right now. And it's not going to get any easier for them losing some of their better players, although they do have, I think, 5 guys in the lineup that are committed to coming back for a 5th year with their COVID year. So they should be a veteran team next year if they keep the coaching staff in place, which I'm sure is another thing Marlon Eichenberry's saying is in his favor. If they can keep him in place, they can keep most of the team in place and hopefully keep improving. But they've kind of been in that purgatory lately where, like I said, they're not bad, they're not good either. How much interest are you going to gather if you're doing that every year?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're about to hit a stage where baseball is going to be a sort of must-see baseball in the Sun Belt. But speaking of must-see, Tibbs, let's stop talking about the losers like Arkansas State. Let's start talking about the winners. How's it shaping up here, Tibbs? Where do you see this shaking out? We've got some top teams up there, some of them like Louisiana needing a good outing to secure a place in the field of 64. And then there's some like Texas State that no matter what they do, they'll probably be in it anyway, right? So who else out there needs to have a good showing to be in that field of 64?
I think there's 3 teams that are locks right now to get into the NCAA regionals. Obviously, Texas State at the top of the Sun Belt Conference standings, Georgia Southern, and Coastal Carolina. I think Louisiana Lafayette, by all indicators, is just on the outside looking in. I don't know how many wins that takes for them to make that leap inside. You got to assume, though, that they have to at least make it to a championship game appearance in order to do that. Although, depending on who they beat along the way there, could bump one of those other teams out, and we still only see 3 Sun Belt Conference teams in the postseason.
That could happen. Louisiana gets a pretty tough seed. They open up with South Alabama, and that's kind of tough. South Alabama, that's my second team, when it's not the Red Wolves. So I feel like South Alabama could very well. That's a match of 4 and 5 seeds. That's pretty tough. That's a tough road to hoe. But I think if Louisiana gets by South Alabama and gets into that sort of maybe championship 4, I feel like they have a good chance of getting into the field of 64, especially given the sort of reputation that they have. I feel like they can get it.
I'm interested also to see kind of how Little Rock and App State goes in that other single elimination game there on a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Does Little Rock try to go out making noise in the conference tournament, or do they just kind of go through the motions and App State rolls on with that?
Little Rock has been a funky team. They get beat by programs that they should beat, and then they beat programs that they shouldn't beat. I really don't understand anything about Little Rock, but Appalachian State always seems to play, at least this year in baseball, on pure emotion and grit. It's like, I don't know what kind of talent they have. I don't know where they belong in the universe of college baseball, but it seemed like they were destined to at least make the tournament. UA Little Rock, to me, is a team that probably has more talent, and I think they should get further than Appalachian State. But every time I count out Appalachian State, they make me look like a fool. So I'm not even prepared. What do you think, Tibbs? What do you think happens in that matchup?
I don't think it really matters, because depending on what happens, the lowest or the highest remaining seed will get to face Texas State.
Yeah.
I don't see anybody that can beat Texas State out of those 4 possible teams.
I think I read where Texas State has won 15 straight conference games. Does that sound right to you?
10 straight.
10 straight. Okay. That's a lot.
That
That's
is a lot. And you got to wonder, have they peaked? I don't think they have. I think they're still one of the best teams in the nation and definitely in the Sun Belt Conference. And I don't know if they're necessarily just going to buzz their way through the conference tournament, but I see them being there playing for a trophy on Sunday.
You know what's funny is that you had all that great stuff to say about Texas State, all that nice stuff to say about the Bobcats, and still today on Twitter we were accused of not giving Texas State the respect they deserve. Did you see that today?
I did. And you know what I said about that?
What's that?
That's nice. I remember being in San Marcos. Were you there?
By the way, Shane, I don't know if you know this, you being new to the crew and all, but Dusty is a sort of honorary Bobcat. You know, he lives nearby. He pops by San Marcos any chance he can get. He gets VIP treatment when he shows up. He hangs out with the athletic director and the chancellor and some of the celebrity guests that they have at the Bobcats. And Dusty always has a good time. So we always try to say a good word about the Bobcats, but it's never enough, Dusty. It's never enough.
Unappreciative.
So welcome to this.
Do some more.
Just welcome to this volatile environment that is the Sun Belt, Shane. Shane, you think you're going to come in and everybody's going to be nice. Oh, they're going to be nice to you for a while. But you just win a few games, buddy, and the target will be on your behind.
With that said, though, we are 40 days until JMU, ODU, Southern Miss, and Marshall are officially in the league.
Yeah. That's going to be pretty cool.
Do you have that marked on your calendar, Jeremy?
I do, like on the calendar that's like inside my head, not like a physical calendar. But does that coincide kind of like when Coastal Carolina came into the league, when they won the championship in baseball and then the next day they were in? So what if Southern Miss does the same thing?
I'd be okay with that. Other than us having to hear about how great Conference USA is and that, you know, look at what they did before they left and they'll never do that in the Sun Belt. Other than those limited discussions that would pop up, I'm okay with Southern Miss lifting the big trophy in Omaha. I
am absolutely happy with that too. One, because it's a group of 5 program. And I love seeing that over, say, somebody from the Pacific or some Pacific. What am I thinking of? The Pac-12 or from the Big Ten or from the SEC winning it. I get tired of seeing those guys winning. I would much rather see Conference USA or even the MAC hoist that trophy anytime than say somebody from them. And then to have it be Southern Miss, somebody who's coming into the conference, that's just more juice for us, right?
I'm definitely supportive of the Southern Miss, not necessarily the Conference USA portion of that, just for full disclosure.
I'm trying. Listen, I'm trying. I know that we've butted head with Conference USA before, but let's face it, we've won this war, Tibbs. We can be good victors.
No, not at all. It's a true battle, and we're going to kick them while they're down, and then jump up on the top rope. Elbows first.
So Shane, when it's official and all the new guys get into the Sun Belt, tell me, are there parades planned? Is there like a key to the city being offered to Commissioner Gill? Will there be commemorative medals? Maybe a commemorative coin? What's JMU doing to celebrate this momentous occasion?
I don't know exactly what happens on July 1st, but it is interesting. Just yesterday, I don't know exactly how this happened. It must have been somebody on a rooftop or something got a photo of into the football stadium where they were painting the Sunbelt logos onto the turf. And that went wild. Like that blew up. And so that was, that was the big celebration yesterday when people saw that. And that was one of the biggest questions I've gotten, most common questions I've gotten for the past 6 months was, when are they going to take the CAA logos off the field, put the Sunbelt logos on? When are they going to change the basketball court? When are the banners going to come down? Like, that question came up over and over again. So when they saw those logos going onto the football field, that actually was like big, at least online, that was a big celebration for the JMU fans yesterday.
Well, that's a good representation of the transition, right? I mean, that's what makes it real. It's like when you wake up with the wedding ring on your hand. That means that there's no going back when you start stripping off the old logos and painting on the new logos. That's going to be that's when everything is real. But Tibbs, I have a question for you that might be more, well, actually Shane could answer it too. I can't answer it because I'm kind of dumb. Is football the first sport that officially becomes a Sunbelt sport? Is it football and volleyball and whatever comes at the beginning of fall? Is that it? There's nothing that precedes it, like some weird beach volleyball thing or anything like that, right? It's football, right?
I would have to check the schedule. I mean, I think sometimes volleyball or cross country or golf might start late August when football starts in September. I'll have to double check, but it'll be one of those. Like, and I mean, we'll be honest too. Nobody's really paying attention until football starts. That's when the school year starts for most people, is that first football weekend. Like, you move in, you have some parties, you go to some classes, but college life on campus begins the first football weekend, doesn't it? I mean, that's when school begins, really, for a lot of people, right?
I think you're absolutely right on that, Shane. Even if
this year, Jeremy, 103 days away, we get our first taste of Sunbelt Conference football. Friday, September 2nd, Virginia Tech travels to ODU, and the Army invades Conway, South Carolina.
I didn't even realize that was a Friday night game for ODU. You know what's interesting about that? ODU season tickets are up huge this year compared to their previous years. What they've got going on is if you buy season tickets for $150, $200, you get tickets to that Virginia Tech game. Single game tickets for Virginia Tech are going for $400 on StubHub right now. So people are buying their season tickets for one game. It's that's going to be pretty insane atmosphere down there. I know you need me to talk about ODU. We represent the whole state of Virginia. That's what's going on in Norfolk right now.
Let me tell you something. That is the first real inside information we have obtained about ODU since we've started the show. Tibbs, we should have a gong for this when we do post-production. When Shane talks about ODU, there should be a boom.
I'll just make sure his volume is turned up really loud so everyone can hear it.
We've got an ODU fact to share.
Yeah, it's the ODU thing is going to be so interesting because JMU and ODU were so aligned in the whole conference realignment thing. They were allies in getting to the same spot, but generally speaking, they hate each other. So like once they're actually competing again, that's going to be the interesting thing. It's like how quickly that alliance and that brotherhood of getting together in the Sun Belt, how quickly that goes away, and the old going back, decades into the CAA, how quickly the old rivalry comes back, and any bitterness may come back after working together for a few years to make this happen.
Oh no, the bitterness will come immediately, Shane. There's no goodwill in the Sun Belt. It's all hatred. Speaking of hatred, actually not speaking of hatred. Dusty, let's instead, the complete opposite. Let's talk about love. What do you love, Dusty? Dusty, I was trying to soft launch into that. You launched straight into it, but yes, we love our next guest. He's one of our first guests, one of the first guests that ever graced Fun Belt Podcast. He's come back because why? We're approaching June content, and we need quality June content to get us through the summer. The guy who's going to help us through that transition, the guy who knows everything about college football, elite or just college sports in general, Chris Vannini of The Athletic. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here, guys. Apologies if my voice is a little hoarse. I lost it during the Manchester City game this morning when they came back doing the championship. So my throat's been a little dry all day now.
Wait, all day you've been suffering from this. How monumental was this game that caused this sort of physical change in you?
Well, for anybody who wasn't paying attention, they came back from a 2-0 deficit in the final 15 minutes, scored 3 goals in 5 minutes to win the Premier League championship. It was a almost copy of them scoring 2 goals at the end to win the championship in 2012. So it was like a redux of the 2012 championship 10 years later, and I went nuts. My dogs got scared, and my voice has been feeling it all day.
Is that the most excited you've been about any football game in a while?
I'm trying to think. The last one might have been, probably would have been the Michigan State trouble with the snap game at Michigan. I was at that game. So that's probably the last time there was a feeling like this.
Well, thoughts and prayers go out to your voice, because we need your insight tonight. We need every bit of Chris Vannini we can get. Now, if you start fading and falling away, we implore you, take some juice, eat some vitamins, because we have a full slate of questions to ask that only you can answer.
I'm down for it.
Starting with this question. So recently you wrote about the sort of that the NCAA was recommending or saying you can relax some of your qualifications or restrictions into who gets into their conference tournaments, and that has resulted in people getting rid of divisions. Why are people moving away from divisions?
Mostly because conferences have gotten too big where they don't play each other. You know, Texas A&M has been in the SEC for more than a decade. They've only played once. Georgia's never traveled there. And so, especially with the SEC going to 16 now, like you want to have new opponents. You want to freshen up those conference schedules the same way schools are freshening up non-conference schedules with some bigger matchups. So that's part of it. The other part of it is you want to put your conference in the best position to make the playoff. And if you have 1 versus 2, there's a pretty good chance that the winner is going to get in, especially in an expanded playoff, which is why the Alliance's insistence on Power 5 automatic bids was kind of pointless, because they're never really going to be in a spot where they don't get it. And so those are two of the big reasons to have fresh schedules, to have your best teams at the end that will help you in the playoff ultimately.
Well, obviously the playoff factor doesn't weigh in too much for the group of 5. The group of 5 just has to have miraculous things that have happened to be even put into that to that conversation, with Cincinnati being case in point. Your article goes on to talk about how some of the group of 5 conferences, some may be moving into no divisions, several aren't, including the Sun Belt. What did Keith Gill have to say about the Sun Belt and its divisions?
The Sun Belt is not getting rid of divisions. They're going to keep them. And you know, we knew this news was coming. I'd spent the last bit of time talking to various people throughout the group of 5 commissioners and whatnot to just kind of get a sense of what they were going to do. And Keith Gill said no, because geography was a big reason for expanding, adding James Madison and Old Dominion and Marshall in the East and Southern Miss in the West. You want to have those games, your JMU Marshalls, your JMU App States, or App State Marshalls, ODU JMU, all those kinds of things. That's a big reason they expanded. They didn't lose anybody. They didn't need to make up for anybody they lost. They wanted to add teams. They wanted to add regional rivalries, which is what the Sun Belt has been doubling down on, to try to be a regional based conference compared to the American, which is spreading out, always going for big markets and stuff like that. So that was ultimately the main reason. I asked him if he thought it could cost him a New Year's 6 spot, not necessarily a playoff spot, but a New Year's 6 spot. And he said their analysis says that it probably won't. If that changes, they could change, but they don't feel the need to. It's something everybody in the conference agreed to at conference meetings this week.
So we really feel like the Sun Belt Conference is the G5 league out there. If we pretend and say Keith Gill says, yeah, we want to follow the SEC or the ACC, whatever, do away with divisions, Do you feel that that just kind of dilutes the product and makes the Sun Belt just another league?
You're saying if they get rid of divisions or just
Correct.
another league? No, I don't think so. Because, I mean, we saw the Mountain West is getting rid of divisions. The Mountain West has a case to be the strongest group of 5 league post realignment. And they've opted to do it. They've opted to get rid of the divisions, feeling that it's best to pit the top 2 teams no matter what against each other. You know, the way the Sun Belt was set up before, they had divisions, but everybody almost played everybody. You had 10 teams, you played 8 conference games. You know, there was only one team you were missing every year. So essentially, it almost would have been, you know, if they were only at 10 teams, maybe they would have gotten rid of divisions for that reason, because they're already almost playing a round robin. And then that way you make sure it's 1 versus 2 in the championship game. But this way, you know, they really want to go for those rivalry games that they want to kind of help create. And it's, I get it. I understand what they want to do.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody from the Mountain West, why they were kind of positioning themselves to remove divisions. And my argument for divisions was that divisions actually create another layer of rivalry. That's just kind of interesting to me, in terms of like, for some reason, Sun Belt East and the Sun Belt West kind of have a rivalry with each other. You know, it's kind of funny because normally we wouldn't care if like say like Arkansas State not necessarily would care that Georgia State was having a good season or not, but it seemed like it was extra fun to know that have that extra Sun Belt West versus Sun Belt East sort of dynamic. Do you think that there's a chance that some of these smaller conferences can lose out on that? Or is that just like, no, man, this is the way of the future. It's the way it has to go.
Well, the Mountain West is a little bit different too, because there are not a lot of regional rivalries. They are very spread out. I think there are like 8 different states across 12 teams. Outside of Colorado State, Wyoming, Colorado State Air Force, you're not making a lot of bus trips. Fresno, San Jose, probably. You're not making a lot of bus trips. You're making a lot of plane trips anyway. So that was another reason for it. They're still going to protect rivalries. Those that I mentioned are probably going to be protected in some way based on someone in the conference told me. But that makes it a little bit different. You know, the MAC is another conference unlikely to get rid of divisions based on talking to people in that league. And a big reason for it is you got 6 teams in Ohio, you got 3 teams in Michigan. You know, you've got a lot of in-state rivalries there that you want to kind of keep together. It's a bus league, essentially, and that matters. And by expanding, the Sun Belt made the East Division a bit of a bus league, depending on where exactly you are. And so that's what they wanted to do. And so in terms of the rivalries, it's kind of different, just kind of how it works by conference.
When you look at the MAC or the Sun Belt or these conferences, are they also kind of in a position where if their best team doesn't win the conference championship, it doesn't matter anyway? I mean, if it's, you know, is that kind of where they're looking at it at this point? You know, if the best team gets upset in a championship game, it doesn't really matter if it's number 1 versus number 2 or East versus West or anything. Is that kind of how they're looking at this point?
Most likely. I mean, in most years, there's typically one really good team, but honestly, the Sun Belt the last few years has had a couple. I mean, you had Coastal, you had App, you had Louisiana. All the last 2 years have all been in that New Year's Six mix. And had Coastal and Louisiana played in 2020 and had Cincinnati been upset by Tulsa that year, maybe something else happens. So honestly, the last couple of years work against the Sun Belt in that factor because they have had 2 really good teams. But if Louisiana is your top 25 team, East West, you're kind of getting the same deal anyway, which is I think what they've had. So
switching gears just a little bit, Chris, I noticed that you had a little bit of interest in the NFL draft, and I saw that you wrote a little something about Jalen Tolbert. What interested you about Jalen Tolbert and his entry into the NFL to the Dallas Cowboys?
Well, we were assigned, everybody at The Athletic, we were assigned 5 to 8 players to write pre-draft stories that once the second they got drafted, we'd run the story. And Jalen Tolbert was one that I got from him. And I talked to one of his former wide receiver coaches there at South Alabama. And something that really stuck out to me was that people wanted Jalen Tolbert to transfer after last season, after 2020. Yeah, after 2020, when the one-time transfer goes through going into 2021, a lot of teams came after him, including an SEC team, is what his coach told me. But he wanted, and with a coaching change, that's a lot of time when guys will transfer out. He could have gone to a place where he knew, a school with an established coaching staff that does work with wide receivers, but he wanted to stay home in Mobile again and finish out his career there. And I think that impressed a lot of people around him and probably around the Cowboys as well. His big play ability really stands out. I think he led the league. I think he led the country in catches of like 50 plus yards or something like that last year. So he's definitely been a downfield threat. And I know that was really appealing.
All those catches came at the expense of Arkansas State. I remember every one of them quite handedly. So is there anything that you said that everybody had to cover at least somebody? Did you see anybody else get drafted from the Sun Belt that you find intriguing?
I didn't even catch day 3 of the draft, so I didn't even know who was totally drafted. Something was going on that Saturday. I was jumping out, so you'd have to tell me who from the Sun Belt was drafted, and I could let you know. I honestly don't know.
I'll type you out a list, and then you can have it for later.
I completely day 3. I think I went out and did something, and I was like, I just wanted to kind of get away from football that weekend. And
let me tell you something though about the Sun Belt, Chris. That is the big day for draft in the.
I know. Well, it's the big day for everybody. You got the most players drafted. You got a ton. You got 4 rounds. That's when a lot of notable names. I just honestly don't know who they are.
The Sun Belt had a lot of guys that were drafted there late, as you said, and signed the undrafted free agent. We had a sports agent on explaining to us how free agency works. When you have a guy like Jalen Tolbert get drafted, though, what do you feel that does to the league in order to help with the recruiting, to help with the perception of the league?
Well, the Sun Belt has really made a point to try to be, hey, if you're not going to the SEC, you can stay close to home and come here. And I think the elevation of the league on the field with its teams. I mean, the league's only 22 years old in terms of a football conference. I mean, it's not that old. And so the more this league has success on the field, top 25 teams, prime time games, the more attention it gets. You get those draft picks. If there's a really good kid in Alabama who doesn't get an Alabama or an Auburn offer, maybe he wants to go to Troy or something like that. I know that's what a lot of coaches in that league tried to do instead of maybe taking that Big 12 offer or something like that, a way to stay closer to home.
So this past week in college football, there was no real discussion about football. It was more about Uncle Nick and Jimbo Fisher having a little lover spat about semantics over collectives, NIL. What are your thoughts on that and how that trickles down even here to the G5?
I honestly don't think it's that big of a deal. I'm really I think we're all sick of hearing about it and talking about it. I mean, look, Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia and Texas A&M are going to get the best players. It's the way it's always been. I mean, like you got a handful of differences, but all in all, not all that much is changing. Look, Jimbo always signs a top 10 class, a top 5 class. Him getting number 1 is not out of the realm of possibility just based on his history. And, Nick Saban wants to throw this fit and do all these things. He signed the number 2 class. Like, it's not like Alabama is hurting here. They got Georgia Tech's best running back in the portal. They got all SEC linemen in the portal. They're never going to have roster holes again because of the transfer rule. The transfer rule, the one-time transfer, that is having a greater effect on college football than NIL is. But Alabama is going to be fine. Nick Saban is not the messenger is not the guy to deliver that message. Just like Jimbo Fisher is not the guy to deliver the, hey, we didn't buy our players, whatever he wants to say type of deal. So I think a lot of people kind of, even in coaching, just kind of rolling their eyes at the two of them. Look, we ate it all up. I liked it. it's a lot more fun than talking about bylaws at this time of the year. I'd much rather have coaches calling each other narcissists. That's a lot more fun. But the overall issue, I think, is really a bit blown out of proportion.
So because it's coming to that point where things are going to get dead. I know the baseball season's going to wrap up pretty soon with its conference championships and then with its NCAA tournament, and then it'll be a desert of an ocean of time that we have to cross before football kicks up again. What does the Athletic do in that time?
Well, June is the big recruiting month. I mean, that's when you have all the camps. You've had coaches on the road recruiting all of this month. Next month, it's all the players going to the schools on the weekends. So here in Dallas, SMU's having a mega camp one weekend, the same weekend that TCU's having a mega camp. So there's going to be like a ton of stuff going on. And that's where a lot of, I think, the beat writer coverage goes. For myself, that's a time to find out kind of more offbeat type stories, feature stories, stuff that's not time sensitive. I'm working on a story about James Madison moving into the Sun Belt and what they bring and kind of their history of success and stuff like that. Got a lot of plans for some other things I want to do that I've just kind of had on the docket for a while, but I just haven't been able to get to because there's news happening over and over and over again. So there's plenty of stuff to do. Football is a year-round sport now. Coverage-wise, like it's different than basketball. Nobody really cares about college basketball in the fall. Everybody's focused on football. People are focused on football all year round. Like you just said, it's mid-May, and I'm doing more radio. I'm doing as many radio hits this month as I am during the season typically. Like it's just, there's always something that pops up at this point.
Well, Chris, I think Shane has a question regarding JMU, but before you move on to that, I have a programming suggestion for you. I feel like you and Nicole Auerbach have a great simpatico on Twitter. I think you guys should have a podcast. Just a weekly thing where you two just bounce ideas off each other and see where it heads. Tell me that's not a good idea.
Well, she has a weekly podcast that's on the main Athletic College Football Andy Staples Show feed. It's called Power Hour. I'm on there every other week, every third week or so during the season. I don't think it's started back up yet. It'll probably be closer to the season when that happens. But we're trying to do different things. Like we have these things in the Athletic. They're called live rooms. They're essentially Twitter Spaces. Yeah. And I did one with David Ubben and a few other people right after the Jimbo press conference. And so that's something we might do more of moving forward, even making it a weekly thing, almost like a live show, something like that. So, with Nicole, I've been on her podcast a lot. I'm probably going to continue to be moving forward. And she's always great to work with.
We're just glad you keep coming on the little show like the Fun Belt podcast.
Yeah, and you don't need Andy Staples. You just get rid of that guy.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, he's only doing like 5 podcast episodes a week or something like that. He's a machine.
So the big freak out in Harrisonburg this past week was Diamante Tucker Dorsey going into the transfer portal this late in the process. I've talked to people at JMU, but how much have you talked to coaches just around the group of 5 about seeing that happening so late in the year, as opposed to once they've gotten through spring ball in the past, they probably felt pretty good about where the roster stood. Is that a main concern for people other places?
Well, I talked to Diamante Tucker for my story about JMU. I'm probably not going to use it now because he's not going to be there.
I mean, it was a total shock. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's kind of part of the process. Like, I mean, end of spring is also when coaches cut roster sizes and let guys go essentially. And so it kind of goes both ways, but it is weird with the one-time transfer rule. And it came up with Jordan Addison, the Pitt receiver who's going to USC. It's that, like, you don't typically see that in the NFL. You don't have a guy go through OTAs and then just say, I want to play on another team, and he goes and he can just go there. But those NFL players are employees with collective bargaining agreements and stuff like that. So transfer windows are a thing that are getting a lot of momentum. Something I think the Transformation Committee, Division I Council, various committees are looking at. Could be like 5 weeks from the end of the season. and maybe 5 weeks post spring, I think, is when you have to jump in. You can join a school at any time. The idea is there'll be a period of time when you can leave. And the idea is so it's not 24/7 that everybody has to worry about losing kids or something like that.
Mark Emmert's leaving the NCAA post. If you're elected president, Chris, what's the first thing that you're tackling?
I mean, I think you got to figure out a way to kind of collectively bargain with players. Not that they're necessarily employees, not that they're necessarily in a union, but everything's just kind of a mess right now. There's no regulations whatsoever. So if you find a way that you can work together with the players to come to an agreement on transfer windows or just various issues, just to get everybody at the table doing the same things together. I think that's what a lot of people want to see. Just some order kind of to this all. Players can make their money and do their thing. It's just like it's like the NFL right now with unlimited free agency and no salary caps and no salaries or transparency, and it's just all kind of a mess, I think. And it's better than it was for the players, but I think everybody would be better served to kind of have some order for this so we know everything looks legit.
Anyway, Chris, thanks for joining us on the show. I know that this was a real test for your voice and that you managed to get through this in flying colors. None of us are medical experts, but I think it's safe to say that you don't have monkeypox, that you're in good health, and that we're happy that you spent a little time or as little or as much of your healthy time with us. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, guys. Appreciate having me anytime.
So we had another great conversation there with our favorite guest, Chris Vannini with The Athletic. Love talking to him. I hope he comes to New Orleans so that we can actually meet face to face and have one of these big powwows.
That would be cool.
It would be great. But until then, Jeremy, give me your plug, promo, parting shot.
So this week, I run a blog about the Sun Belt and about more particularly about the Red Wolves. And it gets to that time of year where the topics begin to dry up a little bit. And I was really surprised and delighted to find that something new has come up on the internet that I hadn't seen before. It's something called Nuke Map. Have you seen this?
I did see your article on Nuke Map.
Yes. Shane, I don't know if you saw it. But
your blog's my introduction to that whole scene there.
Well, if our listeners haven't seen Nuke Map essentially it was developed by some scientist or some researcher, and he sort of has this database of different atomic and nuclear devices. And then he sort of juxtapositions the heat damage, the blast damage, the radioactive damage that can happen with each bomb, and you can place it on any city in the world. So what I did was I blew up the Sun Belt just to determine what kind of damage you can do with some of these atomic bombs. And what was interesting to me was like the atomic bomb that was used on Hiroshima 80 years ago. It has very localized damage compared to the biggest bomb ever produced, which was produced in Russia. It's 100 megatons, as opposed to I think the little boy was something like 10 kilotons. And it's so big, if it were dropped on Jonesboro, Arkansas, you would see heat and blast damage in Memphis, which is about 70 miles away, which I found incredible and a little bit astonishing. And quite frankly, a little bit frightening. So if you want to see how some of the Sun Belt, and by the way, I didn't put James Madison in that, Shane, because you guys aren't a member of the Sun Belt yet. Yeah, I'm gonna have to.
We're safe till July.
In July, when I really need this type of content, I can come back to it and blow up JMU. And that's my parting shot. Tibbs, what's your parting shot?
My parting shot, something we didn't even mention. And for Shane, Jeremy, for Shane, Louisiana Lafayette won the Sun Belt Conference regular season tournament and actually had a pretty good showing there in the Clemson Regional, making it to Sunday before falling 8-0. Yeah. It was a 1-0 game headed into the third.
And then what happened?
the wheels fell off the bus.
Oh, that's too bad. Yeah.
But still a great season for the Raging Cajuns. They definitely represented the Sun Belt Conference well, and kudos to them.
Greatly disappointed, Tibbs, that more Sun Belt teams weren't represented by that tournament. But
it did come out. Texas State was in the first 4 out, though. So we were not far off with our prediction of having 2 teams.
I really wanted 2 teams. Hell, I wanted 10 teams. It didn't happen, but congratulations to the Cajuns for representing the Sun Belt well. We know that when James Madison gets in, that the softball landscape for the Sun Belt will become even stronger. Shane, this is your first night as a 100% representative of Fun Belt Podcast. This is your first plugs, promos, and parting shots. What do you got?
I'll just do the plug and I'll tell people dnronline.com. You'll see a lot more Sunbelt content here going forward because we're completely done with the Colonial Athletic Association and we're going to be a Sunbelt publication for the most part going forward. So go check us out there.
And really, Tibbs, our association with Shane has already been 100% victory in that we finally got our first piece of inside information, not on James Madison, which we expected from Shane, but from ODU.
He's earning his money.
I get some ODU stuff from time to time. So yeah, that'll hopefully pay off.
Okay. My name's Jeremy Harper from Hellraiser. This is Dusty Thibodeaux from Warhawk Report. And joining us for the first time, welcome to the show, Shane Mettlen from representing JMU. Thank you very much for being on the show, Shane. Shane, what was your first impression of the show now that you're on the show?
You guys have fun, and I think it'll be a good time.
All right, so for the 3 of us, I say goodbye. Catch us next week when I'm sure we're going to have some spectacular guests, trying to get some guys on, hopefully get us through June and July. I think we can make it. Party, or just, what's the best way to sign off, Tibbs? Say something profound.
Jeremy, you're special.